Cool. Well, first of all, how have you been?
Good. How are you?
Good. Well,
Yeah.
how did you feel the night of the book awards? Did you feel like it was crazy?
It was absolutely crazy. Like we just had no idea we're gonna win. So yeah, it was crazy. So but yeah, it's been good like since then too. It's been really exciting. We were already working on it before the award ceremony, but Penguin Random House and Doubleday will be publishing the book in the UK.
Wow.
So yeah, so we're like,
Congratulations.
yeah, so we're really excited about that. And yeah, so yeah,
I
how are
love
you
your
doing?
publisher here. I love that it's, what is it, 2 cent
Two
radio?
dollar radio,
$2 radio.
radio.
That's a little
Yeah,
tiny, the
I know.
little tiny radio.
I
Oh my
know.
gosh. I was like, that is such a cute logo. I love it.
I know. They're the best. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. I've been super excited to talk to you. I felt like when I saw you at the book awards, I wanted to just like blurt out all of my questions. And I was like, I've got to save it for the interview.
No, it's
Um,
all good.
I'm going to start just by reading the little like summary that was put up about the book, just so that anyone who's watching this, if they haven't happened to read the book, at least they have the summary. So the summary I think that the publisher had said, in 1913, Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring premiered at the new Theatre des Champs-Élysées in Paris. The work so perplexed audiences that a riot broke out. Only a Russian could do that, says Alexander Ivanovich. Only a Russian could make the whole world go mad. A century later, in November 2013, thousands of Ukrainian citizens gathered at Independence Square in Kiev to protest then President, I'm not even going to pretend like I know how to say his name.
Viktor Yanukovych.
Okay. Failure to sign a referendum with the European Union, opting instead to forge a closer alliance with President Vladimir Putin in Russia. Peaceful protests turned violent when military police shot live ammunition into the crowd, killing over 100 civilians. I Will Die in a Foreign Land follows 4 individuals over the course of a volatile Ukrainian winter as their lives are forever changed by the Euromaidan protests. Katya is a Ukrainian American doctor stationed at a makeshift medical clinic in St. Michael's Monastery. Misha is an engineer originally from Pripyat. Is that how you say that? Who has lived in Kiev since his wife's death. Slava is a fiery young activist whose past hardships steel her determination in the face of persecution. And Alexander Ivanovich, a former KGB agent, climbs atop a burned out police bus at Independence Square and plays the piano. As Katya, Misha, Slava, and Alexander's lives become intertwined, they each seek their own solace during an especially tumultuous and violent period. The story is also told by a chorus of voices that incorporates folklore and narrates a turbulent Slavic history. While unfolding an especially moving story of quiet beauty and love in a time of terror, I Will Die in a Foreign Land is an ambitious, intimate, and haunting portrait of human perseverance and empathy. So if you haven't read the book, it's really good.
Thank you.
Is there anything when you like, if someone asks you about the book and you try to describe it, let's say in your elevator pitch, you have
Yeah.
3 floors to explain it. How would you quickly explain the book to someone?
Well, sadly, it's a lot easier now that most people even know about Ukraine with the war going on. So, I mean, now I can say that it's a novel about 4 people during the protests that initially, led to this current war in Ukraine. They were anti like Russian influence type protests and stuff. So people tend to be like, oh, okay, so this is like this is literally just right before the war started in like 2014. So basically, yeah.
And what drew you to that particular event in 2014? Obviously, right now it seems very obvious just because the world's eyes are on Ukraine and that part of the world. But I'm assuming, well, I guess I should even ask, like, how long have you been writing this? Like, when was the first idea and why was it this event that kind of caught your attention?
Yeah, so I was actually in an MFA creative writing program at ASU. And my professor at the time, his name is Matt Bell, had us do a novel writing workshop in my first semester. So it was like the first time that he was teaching that course, and it was our first semester in the MFA. And so I was initially going to write a novel, I thought, about baseball. And that ended up not being the case. I ended up watching a documentary called Winter on Fire, which is on Netflix. I think that it's actually on YouTube for free right now because the director was like wants more people to know about it. But so I saw that documentary. I just like came home from classes one day, and this was in 2016. So about like 2 years after everything happened. And I was actually in the class, and we had class on a Tuesday night, so we actually were in class during the presidential election in 2016. So I was already moved by the subject matter. I've never seen protests to that scale where people were like camping out in the streets. I'd never like seen anything like that. I guess in my lifetime I saw Occupy Wall Street, but that wasn't anywhere near like what this was,
Sure, yeah.
So I was just moved by the story, and was like really impressed by the Ukrainian people, just like so gritty and tough. And so I felt even more compelled, though, while we encountered the election, we were halfway through the semester, and I became more committed to the manuscript because we were about to have a president who was buddies with Vladimir Putin, and so it made the work like more urgent, because it was just like, this is, it's still going on, and it was going on then, but it's wild how things have changed,
Before
since
your
then.
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's when I reading it, knowing that you had to have started it a long time before we were all having the news that was hitting us. It felt almost prophetic, I was like, holy cow, I can't believe that this is in the world right now at this moment, and I also felt that as much as I felt like I learned a lot, and I learned so much about Ukraine. I didn't know anything about Ukraine, really. I mean, just a little bit.
I didn't either.
Learn in the news,
Yeah.
But I kept saying, and I think I said this to you the night of the Young Lions Awards at the New York Public Library, but I kept saying to people, like, how did we get here? How did this? Because for an American who's not following a news cycle about those protests that I'm sure in that part of the world, they're hearing about it all the time, and we're not. And so I felt like, no war comes out of nowhere. And so it was just sort of, what's going on. And so and this book, falls in my lap, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I know it's fiction, but there's also a lot of truth about the historical moments. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it does feel to me like it's all researched to be historically accurate. It's just that you've put your fictional characters within the history. Is that correct?
Exactly. I did a lot of research for the book because I was really like not I knew the event, and was reading a lot of books at the time that were love stories during wartime, like The English Patient. We read Atonement, you know what I mean? Like just those like just really beautiful books. And so I was compelled to like write a novel about two people falling in love at Euromaidan. And so that's where it like started. And as I was doing like more research to understand the environment of the, protests and that sort of thing, it just became more and more clear that this attack on Ukrainian sovereignty was like, it's been a long time coming. And so it became both a combination of like telling the story about these four people's lives, but then it was also like really important to me once I understood the wider history to then portray that to the audience as well, so then they can understand. It's like educational in a way, because a lot of people sought out the book because they were trying to understand the you know, but
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it's such a great trick in a way. Not that the book is a trick, but you know,
yeah,
there's no way I'm going to sit down and read a textbook about Ukraine. I'm not
yeah,
going
it's
to
a
set
lot.
the time aside for, I'll read articles and I'll do research
Mhm.
for the news, um,
Yeah,
but
it's a
this
lot.
is, it's such an attractive way to learn a lot, you know, where
Yeah.
there's so much information packed into also a really beautiful story.
Mhm.
But you know, you were talking about the election in 2016, and I also did feel as I got deeper into the book, I felt like I got more and more emotional about it, not just because I grew so attached to the characters that you so beautifully brought to life, but also because I started realizing that this is the whole world's problem. You know, like you could feel the
Yeah.
sort of globalness of it. And I think some of that's
Yeah.
in the structure, which I want to ask you about as well. Some of that's with the way that you structured the novel, but talking about the idea of fighting for democracy. And you know, like I mean, I
Right.
was literally in tears reading the section
Mm.
where when the characters are talking about which character is the reporter. I'm so bad with names. um
Oh, there's Dasha.
yeah,
Dasha was
Dasha.
the
So when Dasha is, you know, and she's saying how she talked to both sides, and you know, they're really they're like, how could you talk to both sides? And she's like, it's, we're just our own form of fascism if we don't talk to both sides. Like democracy
yeah,
isn't about who's right, it's about the fact that we have the freedom to disagree. And
yeah.
I'm paraphrasing you terribly, so
No,
forgive me,
no, it's great.
but it really stuck with me. I can't tell you how many times I've repeated a version of that to people when I talk to them and I tell them about the book, because have been forgetting that. I think as Americans, I think people
Yeah,
who live in any democratic country have been forgetting that in the way that the
yeah,
world has been lately. And it was such a like aggressive reminder. Like I felt like it shook me in the way that I want to be shaken. Like I went, oh, right. It's not about me being right. It's not about the people I care about being right. It's literally the fact that I have the freedom to disagree with someone. Like that's what I'm
yeah,
fighting for. And
yeah.
um
Mm.
and I felt like that was so powerfully articulated, and you know, sort of stated in a thesis way in that particular scene, but really has its tentacles through the whole book in terms of the way that conflict is handled and perspective is handled.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much of what was happening, you know, then when I'm writing it and when I'm editing the book. You know, I had a professor who said that when you are writing something that takes place in the past, you're actually looking at it through the lens of the moment that you're writing it. So it's through a lens of like today. So it's sort of like this. So much of the book is like I have the benefit of like knowing more than these characters do about where things are going. And um, so yeah, I think that it was nice to find opportunities where the characters were able to speak more to things that are happening right now to readers, you know. So I'm that's really like nice to hear from you.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I feel like I do sort of just run around paraphrasing your book for people.
No, that's so amazing. This is such a huge
I'm like,
compliment.
guys,
It's
I'm telling
crazy.
you, it's a really special book.
Oh, this really means a lot. Wow.
Tell me a little bit about the structure, because I was really taken by that. You know, I when I was trying to explain it, when I was like sort of doing my review for A3C Reads, I was saying it's almost like a ballerina who knows how to do, you know, strict classical ballet, and then they choose to break the rules with modern ballet. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
when did you decide on the structure? Did it sort of start to present itself? You know, what was that
Yeah.
process like for you?
Um, so the process of writing this was initially when I wrote the first draft of the manuscript, we finished that course that first semester, but I kept writing the rest of the book, first draft, and ended, you know, in December before the next semester began. But for me, I was writing each, there wasn't the Kobzari voice, which is like sort of like the voice of God or the voice of Ukraine that shows up. That one didn't really exist at that point. there were only the 4 characters. And so I wrote each narrative just like all the way through, just so I understood like
Wow.
how each person, like what their life is like, what happens next. And then I knew that I wanted to like, you know, cut it up and all that kind of stuff. And so that was like the very first iteration of the novel, was just like the voices of the 4 individuals, or the narrator, you know, on behalf of these individuals. And then as I was working through revision, and I felt like way more comfortable with the material, and I had been to Ukraine at that point on a fellowship. So I'd spent like a few weeks in Kiev and in 2018 over the summer, and I was learning more about the environment, and you know, at that point I'd read so much more about the history. So then it became more like I was sort of trying to find out creative ways to, you know, provide more context for like the reader and like the greater scheme of this protest. And so that's when the journalism pops in. Like there's a couple real articles from the Independent and the Guardian. And there's also, you know, the Kobzari voice that pops up, which initially was kind of like came out of Alexander's voice, because he has a very just a command, he has like a commanding voice. And so, but it didn't feel right coming from Alexander because he's Russian. And so that's when the Kobzari kind of evolved. And so I had this like kind of mess of a manuscript, but it was like all these different, like now it was like a collage of things. And so I sent that off to $2 Radio, and they really helped me to work with the manuscript and find like more of the threads and clean it up so that it was actually, it feels like there's a balance now in the manuscript that wasn't there when I was initially working.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the relationship with the editor, because, you know, when you're just a book reader, you don't really know what that relationship looks like and how influential it is on the material. And it seems like it's such a specific skill that people have to be able to look at something and go, oh, if you could move this here or tweak that or clean that, you know, like.
Yeah, they were amazing. Like, so I worked with Eric. It's like a two-part team there, Eric and Eliza, who are partnered, and then they have their friend Brett, who also does like the marketing and stuff for them. And so the initial part of the, you know, revision of the book was with Eric. So, and we had a conversation on the phone when they were interested in it. And so, you know, he threw a couple ideas on like revision, you know, that I was really excited about. And just through the whole process, I mean, like he was able to see, like, I feel like when you're a writer, or even when you're like, I'm sure like when you're an actress, like it's just like when you're so close to the material, having somebody with that like outside perspective to just like see what you can't see, it like helps you to make changes, you know what I mean, and how you approach it. And
but
so,
you're like living it. You're like living all these people in a way. You're like you're giving them a heartbeat and you're in it. You know, it's like I totally relate to that. It's really amazing. I mean, I've never read anything with this kind of structure where it gives you the feeling that this gives you. Because I started to, you know, when I first started reading it, it took me a second, because I was like, wait, where are we? Okay, who are we with? You know, and it just took me a second to like kind of ground myself in the book. And as soon as I had sort of met everybody and I was in it and I realized that this was part of the structure, it was intoxicating. Like, it was like, I didn't want to put it down, because I was like, I don't want to miss this experience, you know, like usually you can kind of like pick a book up and put it down and kind of, you know, where you are in the story. I was like, I can't put it down because I might miss out on this feeling that I'm getting.
Oh, wow.
So cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I do think that like, I mean, I think that like when I was working on this too, one thing that I had in the back of my mind is like, this is dense material, and we live in a society that is very much like our attention spans have definitely changed since before like social media and all that kind of stuff. So I found I've found like that feedback where people are like enjoying reading it. They either have problems with the structure, you know, they're like, I don't know, you know, or which is my dad. My dad's like, I don't know what's going on. So, which is fair.
Totally fair.
But you know, like, but for other readers, it's like it's nice. And for me as a writer, it was nice to be able to like switch my attention into like a different voice, or you know, be able to like process like smaller chunks of things instead of having to worry about like a traditional novel where where you might put it down like between two paragraphs and then you're not really sure like where to pick up the next time. I feel like this book, I had in the back of my mind that, you know, I'm competing with people's like attention with like phones and things like that. Like, you know, that's just another way that
it felt very relevant in that way. And it made me feel like I was there with them. You know, you feel like you're like, oh, right. And I'm surrounded by the headlines. And then this thing is happening. And now I'm at the church where they're helping people. You know, it's like you kind of felt like you were on the streets with them, you know, like it was, you were just sort of in the experience of all of it. It was really effective. And it's really impressive because it also pays off, you know, like the fact that it all weaves through and then it all comes back around. And, you know, like it was really, just such a pleasure to experience the different structure like that. So this book in particular came out of sort of starting in a graduate school class, it sounds like. But then do you have like, in general, when you write, have you started to develop certain rituals or like a certain way that you like to approach? Like, are you someone who has to write every day, even if you're not working on a particular project? Do you like to only write with a certain pen, you know?
yeah. So yeah, it's funny that you asked this question because I'm actually like, you know, had a conversation with my agent like last night and I'm like, or yesterday, I'm like, I'm having trouble writing. But usually I tend to write like, there are moments where like I might like force myself to like sit down and do the work, you know. This summer I took some time off from working. I was fortunate enough to like take some time away from like a 9 to 5 to try and write. And I've found that actually it's more difficult for me to like have like the openness of a day to like work than, I mean, I will have all day and then I will still like start writing at like 10 p.m. So there's something about like the night, I think, that just like sort of envelops, like it just makes everything like smaller and closer, you know, like there's a different part of your like the experience that you can access, I think. And so, I mean, I tend to write at night. I can't write every single day, though I do, like when the moment does strike, I will just stop everything and write, even if it's just like a paragraph or something like that, because you never know what's going to be like useful in the future. So having like a kernel of something that you just like save in a Word doc that you can later on, you know, sometimes when I get stuck, I'll kind of go through the other Word docs that I have and see like, okay, like this section could actually go in here, you know, that kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a lot for me. It's like, it is kind of like a collage. Like, I just feel like really, I just have a lot of different things going on at once. I have a document that's full of like research for a project that I want to work on. I have another, you know, couple documents that are just like in a particular voice, you know, so it's kind of like the gamut. But when I do find, I think that the most important thing for me to find, and I think that what made the difference in this book was that I very clearly like heard Alexander's voice. Like that was like something that just like, when I started writing, I just like his voice just like, you know, like turned on, and I was just like, I don't know where this is going or anything, but just it's truly like one of those like muse moments where it's just like it doesn't feel like you anymore. It just feels like something's just moving right through you. And so I mean, it sounds kind of cheesy to say that, but it's just like that's what I when I find like the voice and it feels right, I feel like the story does it just like, once you find that voice, it just like, the story just comes out, you know? And
Yeah.
that ended up happening with all of the characters in this book. Slava was actually the hardest character for me to write because she had the most, I mean, they all had trauma, but there was a lot about Slava's trauma in particular. I knew would be very difficult for some readers. So I was trying to like navigate just that whole situation and trying to make sure that, you know, it was being told correctly. And so sometimes the experience of like, you know, writing gets interrupted often with like your own thoughts. You know, you stop hearing like the voice of the character, or like you're not in the scene anymore. Now you're in your own head, like editing it, you know. And so that's where the trouble comes in. But so right now I think that I'm writing a little bit here and there, but I'm really just trying to find a voice or a scene that just like hits it, you know, and then then it will, I'm sure.
I mean, it's such a commitment, right? Like, it's not like what I do. Like, I either, you know, am hired as an actor on a project that's already in existence and I'm working out how to breathe life into something that already has life. Or as a filmmaker, it's a little bit closer because I'm having to like find a vision and a tone and sort of walk through it. But even still, we're talking about like a much more sort of finite stretch of time. Whereas like, you know, writing a novel, it's can be years. It's, you know, it's such a commitment. Like, you can't just be like, yeah, I'm into that, boys. Let's go with that for the next 5 years.
Boom. Yeah, exactly. I think that's also how like the structure ended up being what it was too, because it was just like too much for me. There's no way that anybody would want to read an entire book of, I didn't want to write a whole book of like everything that Alexander had to say. You know what I mean? Like 300 pages of listening to Alexander would be really tough. But when it's like, you know, you have these other people that are in there and having different experiences and different observations, and, you know, it balances everything out. So it's just, but it is a long journey. But that's what's kind of intimidating at the moment, because it's just like, oh, okay, this came out like, and there's like low expectations, I think. I mean, in my perspective, when I was, you know, when $2 Radio picked this up, I was like, oh, great, you know, and I would joke with Eric. I'm like, Eric, like 5 people are going to read this book. Like, nobody, you know what I mean? Like, people are just like, they're not, you know, like, I mean, you're going to promote it, it's going to be amazing. And I'm so thankful. But I really was like, I'm like, this is like a heavy book, you know? And so that was not the case, which we're very excited for. But it was like the stakes were so low when I was writing this. I felt that it was just like I could do anything, and I wouldn't have just no expectations, and so everything's just kind of blown up bigger.
No, I mean, it's tricky. It's something that I think a lot of people don't talk about, that is a real thing for all artists, which is the not danger of success, but like the new problem that comes with success, right? Like, where it's like, you're so grateful, you're so excited, you put all this work into it. There's nothing greater for an artist than to feel like not only do you like your own work. Sorry, someone's at my front door. Not only do you know, feel proud of your own work, but that other people are saying that they like it too. You know, it's like, it's such a wonderful feeling. But then on the other side of that is this new level of pressure and expectation, and it can be really suffocating for the creative process, and it can be very paralyzing, I think, for the creative process. And I have a lot of friends who are filmmakers and writers and musicians, and, you know, like we've been more and more having this conversation because people are starting to admit it to each other, you know? Like, you know, everyone thinks you're flying high when your show does well or whatever. And meanwhile, you're at home going like, can I ever do it again? I don't know. You know?
Absolutely.
So it's, I think it's such a real thing. And it's a real thing that like, we don't culturally have an awareness or like empathy for, because someone who has never written a novel might say like, well, who are you to be upset. You just had a successful novel, you know.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. That's like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like,
Exactly.
I'm super grateful, but I'm also freaked out. you know?
Yeah, yeah, because it's like now the bar is like here, you know what I mean? It's just a
Yeah.
complete, yeah, it's like there was no bar before, you
Yeah.
know.
And
So
also, you
it's,
don't know what you're about to go through. I felt like that with
yeah.
when I directed Sundogs, my first
Mm,
feature.
yeah.
I didn't know how hard and crazy it was going to be to push that boulder up that hill, and then you're in
Yeah.
it. So once you're in it, you just keep pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
Then once you are done with that boulder, you're like, I'm gonna really think before the next time I roll the boulder.
Yeah. Exactly. It's so true. Oh my gosh, 100%. Oh
It's
my
so
God.
interesting to hear too. It's like it's really fascinating to talk to different artists in different mediums because you realize, as different as it all is, there is such a common heartbeat between
Yeah.
the different people's creative processes. You know, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, there might be different nuances to it. You write at night and someone else writes in the morning or whatever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know, it's really kind of amazing. Um, do you feel like you're in your sort of like collage collection phase right now for whatever's
Yeah.
next?
Yeah. I definitely feel like I'm like just taking information in right now, which is actually kind of a fun thing, a fun, you know, place to be in, because it's sort of like it could, you know, any one of these things that I'm looking at, you know, could end up being a whole nother project. But there is that like idea of like, you know, that boulder, you know what I mean, where it's just like, do I want to commit to like, is this the boulder I want to push up? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, is this the one that I want to pursue? And but there's also just like an overwhelming sense of just like there's so much out there that it's just like I have so many ideas and I have like no ideas, if that makes any sense.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
totally.
Like,
I'm with you.
so,
If you saw every like lookbook I've ever made for a show I've pitched on, you would be like, oh, she understands me.
yeah.
I
It's like
I
you would,
totally get it. Yeah, it's a pretty wild thing to sort of push against in your own mind.
yeah,
Do you feel like there's like certain themes that like bubble up for you over and over again?
definitely. Yeah. I think that for me, I think that stories about love, relationships, whatever that kind of looks like, and the complexities involved with that, is definitely something that attracts me. So I don't think that it's possible for me to write. For a while, I was thinking about doing a really dark book, and it just wasn't. It just didn't feel like right to me. It might feel later on, you know, I might feel differently about it later on, but I tend to get really inspired by the idea of like connection and people understanding each other. And, you know, I think about readers and myself as like a writer and a reader, and just like what kind of book would I want to read right now? You know what I mean? And so that's really something that like compels me.
Where does your like really astute ability to find nuance in that come from? Like, do you have parents who are psychologists or something? Or I mean,
No.
where is this like, because every relationship in the novel is so nuanced and there's so much intimacy in that nuance, you know, nothing is like hitting you over the head. There's nothing fairy tale about any of this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all very like textured and gritty and like day to day, and
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
and that is not easy to do. And I would expect this book to be written by someone who was like, you know, 65 or something, and had like lived and, you know, been in a bunch of
Yeah.
relationships and been married and
Yeah.
divorced 4 times or something, you know, like,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
you're this like, you know, young, fresh person. So like, where do you feel like that nuance? Is it just observation or intuition?
I think that for me, it's like, well, first of all, I'm really interested in psychology. So I'm, you know, I'm first generation, so I don't have like, I kind of grew up in an environment with like very young parents who were divorced really early on. So I, you know, only have memories of them being together until like I was like 3.5. But, you know, and even then it's not really like memories. It's more like, you know, the body remembers, but the brain doesn't, you know?
Sure.
But I just kind of had my own experiences and a lot of like mistakes, I think, in relationships. And I think part of that could be, you know, just growing up in a single mother environment, seeing my mom go through relationships for a while.
Yeah.
And then just honestly, years and years of therapy. I think that like just paying attention to like, you know, how I respond and react to things. And yeah, I mean, also just a lot of observation and taking in what other people have also written too, and just like, yeah, life experience. And I mean, I've made like a lot of, you know, relationship mistakes, you know, and like others have made,
As we all have, by the way.
you know, so I think that there's just something about that, like, you know, growing up in an environment where both my parents had their own form of trauma from like their parents, to then like see them try to become better, you know, like they want to like rise above, break the cycle, as they say. And so this was like my version of like trying to like break the cycle, and just trying to be more compassionate and aware, but also have like healthy boundaries, you know, between people, myself and others. And you know, it's really, I think people like to, what's really hot right now is kind of writing the unlikable character, you know, and
Right.
I don't feel like any of the characters are necessarily actually like unlikable in my book. So so, but I don't think that it's because they're not flawed, they're not all perfect, you know what I mean? And
Totally.
I think that that's kind of maybe how I approach my relationships with people, is like I when I meet people, I always give them the benefit of the doubt, and that there's more going on beneath the surface than like we know, you know. And sometimes once you find out that somebody is like a toxic person, they're just giving into a lot of like their trauma or whatever. But you know, a lot of the writing that went into this was just sort of analyzing that, like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to write an unlikable character because then I have to spend a lot of time with them, you know.
Right.
So it's a little selfish in that way.
Fine.
You know, and some people, I mean, like that's totally fine if that's like your thing, like, you know, Fleabag, like all that's, I mean, I love Fleabag, but it's just
Yeah,
like,
but it's, you know, I mean, I feel like what you're doing though is like is what, when someone might say they're writing an unlikable character, that they're reaching to achieve is what you're doing, which is like, you're not judging them as being unlikable. This is a very like, I don't know. This is a very actory answer, just because,
yeah,
you know, it's like one of the early things you learn when you're trained as an actor is like, you cannot judge your character. So like, even if they're a serial killer doesn't get up in the morning and think of themselves as a bad person. They justify
yeah,
everything, and they believe that
yeah,
what they're doing is for some cause, or that they deserve what they're doing, you know. And it sounds crazy, but that person doesn't wake up and go, I'm bad, you know. And so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so then there's this interesting complexity. I mean, it's why we probably are obsessed with true crime, and we're obsessed with
yeah,
these characters as a culture right now, is like, you know, because those kinds of characters have justified all those things to themselves and have made
yes,
themselves likable to themselves, even though what they may be doing is hurting other people or toxic for other people.
yeah,
And so, you know, what I felt, at least reading your novel, was just that they all felt like real humans. I wouldn't
yeah,
say that anyone was remarkably likable or unlikable. They were all
right,
remarkably human. You know, they all
yeah,
just felt like they had good days, they had bad days, they had good moments, they had bad moments, they made good decisions, they made terrible decisions. And I was like, that
yeah,
just feels like being a person. You know?
totally, yeah, exactly,
And
exactly,
a
yeah,
lot of times I think, you know, and maybe this happens more in the film industry than it happens, you know, for you as a novelist, but it's like, there's so much expectation of structure, like certain structure is right, and certain kind of character development is right, and
mm,
certain points have to happen in this person's life for us to buy that character, and
Mm.
suddenly they stop being a person.
Yeah,
You
they're
know,
like a
it's like,
formula.
yeah, you're like checking all these boxes, but you're not necessarily like giving people stories that feel alive, or giving
Yeah.
people, and I'm talking more about like film and TV stuff, you know, and and
No,
it's
it's
an
super
interesting
writing.
challenge, you know, when as an actor, when you get something, because a lot of times you're like, well, they're like 80% a person. And
Yeah,
you're trying to figure out how to
yeah,
get like the next 20% out of some weird stuck checklist that they, you
yeah,
know, had.
yeah.
Um, so
I yeah,
it's encouraging to hear you approaching it from that perspective, because you know, it's, yeah, you want to like the people you're spending years of your life with, but it also just makes them feel real. Like it felt
yeah.
almost like you were
Mm.
recounting a historical group of people, you know, like it felt
Yeah.
like people that
Mm.
existed that you were just telling us about, not people that you had made up.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
I think that it does exist in like the what you're talking about with actors and embodying this character who might be only 80%, fleshed out or complete or whatever, or complex. Um, I I feel like that's definitely one of the challenges I think with writing is you have to like there's nobody like playing that role, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
it's all the responsibility of the writer then, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
to like make this person whatever they are, and I think that like for me it might be a fun exercise to try and write somebody who I'm just like I don't understand, you know what I mean? Like, Kalani doesn't understand, but
Sure.
like maybe there would be some sort of like, because I'm very obsessed with true crime too, but I'm also just like, I don't know. I don't know if I could, it's one of those things where I'm like, but would it feel wrong? Like, would it feel just like off for me to like embody, a serial killer, for example, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As like a character, like that would
Yeah.
feel, it's just, there's some that it's just like, when you, I guess, start from like ground zero and you're trying to like create when this person, I always feel like I kind of said with Alexander, that these sort of like voices or scenes or whatever like pop up in my head, and then you try and make it real or like listen to it, so it never feels like I'm like imagining a person, like materializing out of thin air,
Yeah.
but yeah, it can be a little tricky for sure.
That sounds lonely. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be pretty lonely. I think that like I had the benefit in my MFA program of having like workshops, so we would sit there and we would read our short fiction and people could come back and say like, this was a little flat for me, or I don't believe that somebody would actually do this,
Yeah.
or I liked X, Y, and Z, but yeah, it seems like there's something I think really attractive to me about like working in a like for a show, you know what I mean, and
Right. Like
writing
the
like,
writer's room where there's,
yeah, like a writer's room where everybody's just like has ideas, you know what I mean, and then
yeah.
some of them are like, like no, and some of them are like yes, and
Yeah.
because you have all these different voices that can kind of like collaborate, and then at the same time I'm also just like, but I want to do it, so
Yeah,
it's
you'll
just
be a showrunner
yeah.
someday. That's that job. You get
There you go.
horrible people that you bounce ideas off of, and then at the end of the day, you pick the one you like, and then
There you go, yeah. Totally. But yeah, ultimately it is lonely because yeah, you have to be the one to write it. Nobody else can write the book for you. You know what I mean? Unless you have a ghostwriter, which to me, I don't know. So you don't get the same.
Is there
same
like
kind of,
is there like this like moment at some point where like it's about to be seen by a bunch of people for the first time? Like obviously you send it into the editor, but then you get used to, or to your publisher, but you get used to
yeah,
that, right? So you don't
yeah,
have the same nerves of like turning it into your publisher. But
oh,
like
totally.
when is that moment of like that vulnerable moment where like people in the world are about to see it and you have to just deal with how they feel about it?
That's exactly like, I think you've just sort of described exactly how it feels. I think that it was like, I mean, in, so many of my peers in my program had kind of seen bits and pieces of it, and it was never really, but that's like a whole different environment because you're also working with other people who are being vulnerable and sharing their work
Sure.
with you, so it's like this exchange of ideas and everything. But yeah, moment that like I actually, we got the first shipment of the books in, and it was like shortly before my book release or book launch, I got like really sad. I just had really like
Oh,
which is like wild. You wouldn't think that like it was more of like I think I realized it was like more of like a grieving of like that this is like no longer just mine. You know what I mean? Like this is like
oh,
something that,
wow.
yeah, that it's like it's just other people are going to be able to read or going to read this, and then they can, it's no longer mine. It's just like it's whatever the reader takes from it. It's whatever the people who review it. It's sort of like yeah, you're just kind of like surrendering it to the world. And so I think that there was just like a little bit of like there has to be some part of that, like with acting too, where it's just like the first time like you see like yourself, you know what I mean, up
Right.
there, and then like you're not sure like how people are going to respond, or that kind of thing. And so I was nervous about all of that, but I was also really like, it was like the end of a journey, because it's just sort of like you've spent so much time not only like working on the manuscript, but like being in the heads of these like characters. And so it was just like that idea that I'm like I'm not going to be able to like be in that headspace with like Katya again, like it's done. And in some ways that's like really freeing, because it's just like we did it, like ta-da, but on the other hand, it's just like I missed her, you know what I mean? So, and it's not the same experience when I read my book, you know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, that sentence, you know what I mean? But
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I can only imagine.
But yeah,
I feel that way, especially as a filmmaker. It's like I usually don't rewatch stuff that much after, you're in there like watching every second of it forever. And then once you put it in the world, you're just like, I don't want to look at my mistakes anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I can't handle it. Yeah, it's just, yeah, exactly that. And so, yeah, I think that's, after I had a bit of like just a couple of days of just feeling kind of like sad. And it was just so weird, because I was just like, I don't know why I'm feeling sad before my launch, but I think that was it. And after that, then, it was all very exciting and good. And, when I do have people who have read the book and are moved by it, like it's really affecting for me. It's very like surreal for me to be able to like talk about these characters with people who also love these characters. So it's just like, it's also just like it's a new relationship that I have with them. And I feel like it's, in some ways I've exchanged this closeness with them to then like now having like relationships with readers who are excited about the work, so that's also very cool.
It's really there's just so much in there that I can't wait to read it again, because I feel like it's going to be so interesting to sort of know where it's all going and have a different relationship with all the characters in that headspace. Because when you read it the first time, you don't know what's coming, you don't know where it's going. You're having this very visceral experience with all of them, and so I'm really excited to be able to read it again and just kind of like have a totally different level of intimacy with all the characters. But it's really also, I feel like it to me, it was also really inspiring. This is why we've been trying to kind of put as many quotes as possible out from the book, on Instagram and stuff. I mean, I've literally like, I've tabbed it to death. I don't know if you
yeah, I've seen it. It's so great. It's so exciting.
But so, and part of that is just because it's just a weird time in the world right now. Like I know that there's been so many hard times in the world historically, and I'm sure every generation has felt at some point the way we all feel right now, and thought it's the end of the world. And I think every generation thinks it's the end of the world. At some point someone will be right. Hopefully it won't be us. But when you're in the midst of the news cycles and the bad news and the shootings and the and we're all just so we're barraged by all that right now, and it's on a level that we're not built to handle. Like but in the old days, you just read your local paper. You didn't know
Yeah,
the whole world's bad news. You only knew
exactly.
your local bad news,
Right,
It's
right.
just the saturation of that, I think, is just really hard on our hearts and our spirits. And
Absolutely.
so to read a novel that so celebrated that what made us human is
Mm,
that we can love despite hard times and within
mm,
hard times, and it makes us love harder. I was
yeah.
like, oh wow, it's like it really got in me, like the claws of that got in
Wow.
me in a way where I feel like I think about that daily differently because of your book. I feel
Wow.
like when I'm reading the hard news and I'm seeing the bad headlines and I'm sort of taking
Mm,
all of that in, and I think, but then there's also people out there that are loving their children and making these hard
mm,
decisions to do the right thing, and and you sort of
yeah.
push yourself to see the other
Mm,
side of humanity. And I
mm.
just think it's so hard to do what you did, and it's really, really impactful. So I'm very grateful for your book.
That really is like, I'm sort of blown away by how nice that was. That's really like incredible to hear. And very glad that I
It's
was able
true.
to
Yeah.
write that book. And I'm glad that you feel the way that you do. It's just
Yeah.
very like, it's very, um, yeah, it's very meaningful. There's like, yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I'm going to end on a couple lighter questions. Just
Okay.
some fans have sent some questions.
Oh, fun. Okay.
One of the questions I was really interested in as well, and she asked, what kind of songs inspire you while you're writing?
Oh, that is a really good question. So I put together like playlists basically, um, for whatever, and whatever the vibe is, And so, for this book, it was actually a lot of Ukrainian folk songs and a lot of Ukrainian artists. So even though I couldn't understand all of the Ukrainian in there, it gave me more of a sense of like voice and place, and kind of connected me to that. So yeah, I think that like right now, I'm still like in that, like we talked about, that like collage type state where, I'm just gathering information. So I'm sort of like in this state of actually like gathering like a playlist,
Yeah.
too, for trying to figure out like um what the energy is, and where, what songs might end up like speaking to people. And um also for I'll Die in a Foreign Land, there were like artists that I'd go to that certain songs that were just meaningful for me, and like relationships that I've had, what
Yeah.
I mean, to try and like reconnect to um my own experience of falling in love, and falling out of love, and all of that. So it's really a mix. It's kind of like all over the place. I don't know if they want something more specific, but that's
No, but
kind of
I
where
think that, the answer is totally owned by you. So don't, there's no pressure. I think it's fascinating though, just because, just to even know that music is a part of your process in that way. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get that. I feel like that's also I grew up with musicians. My parents are
There
musicians,
you go. It's awesome.
so it's like, there's days where it's classical music and there's days that it's hip hop and there's days that,
Yeah,
like, there's just different,
it's
you
all
know,
over.
there's days
Yeah.
my husband walks in and he's like, okay, you've got the rap music going. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
What's happening
Exactly.
today?
Exactly. Yes, that's totally, I'm exactly the same. I think like my parents just really loved music, I think, all over the place. So that's always just been something that resonated with me. And for 10 years of my life, I played music. So it's just like, yeah, totally about the
Nice.
process.
And
Yeah.
then the last question I'll ask, which was also a reader's question, is there a book that you're reading right now that you like?
Oh, I am. It's a book called I'm gonna feel horrible because I don't um
This is making me
uh
feel better because this is exactly how I answer so often. I'm like, it's so good. It's on my nightstand. I have no
yeah.
idea who wrote it. I don't know what it's called, but it's great.
Yeah, it's I remember the title is called Slaughterman's Daughter.
Okay.
Um and it's a translation from uh Hebrew. I
Oh,
think
wow.
it was originally written in Hebrew, and it's a Jewish author. And yeah, it's a really, I guess I have a soft spot for like, Eastern European like stories and things like that. And this is just a very like, it's very, I don't know much about Jewish culture or faith or anything like that. So it's kind of like, I'm kind of in this world that I'm totally not familiar with. And that's actually been like really fun. And there's also just like, mayhem that ensues, like, murder, and all of that. But it's a fun book to read. I'm really like enjoying it. And I also think that it has like a bit of that like complexity and perspective changes that I like. So
Oh, that's great. Well,
yeah. So
thank you.
Slaughterman's Daughter.
All right. Well, I could talk to you forever. I've talked to you for an hour. I'm so sorry. I think I told you 20 minutes and I talked to you
Oh
for
no,
an hour.
that's great.
So I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay,
No,
great.
this is amazing. Yeah, I've had such a great time. It's so awesome it's super like flattering and just like overwhelming, to have like your support, and it just really means a lot.
Well, if there's ever
and to do
anything
this,
I could do or any of us at Apartment 3C can do to support you, we are here. We love you. I totally support your collage time, but we're so excited about whatever comes next. No pressure. We don't need any pressure. We just need to
totally.
love you no matter what. So
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for like this, like apartment, like to see and everything that's going on with it. And I'm just really excited to see what comes after me. You know what I mean? Like I want to see the next like
you're
journey.
always going to be our first. You're always
I will always
the
be the
very
first
book on the bookshelf.
Oh
So
yeah, I'm so
yeah.
excited. Oh,
Well,
so amazing.
thank you so much, Kalani, and good luck with everything. And hopefully we'll be in touch really soon.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Great.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.